seats, please. Okay, thank you. A very good morning to you all. It is, I think, 2 minutes past 10 on December the 9th, 2024, and welcome to this joint meeting of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and it's the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well, joint committee. My name is Councillor Ian Selby. I'm the Chairman of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We are not expecting a fire alarm to sound today. If the alarm does go off, please leave the building by the nearest exit, the main staircase or the back right staircase. The assembly point is on the green directly outside the front of SK House. If anybody present should require assistance in these circumstances, can you please make yourself known to a member of the council staff? Please can you ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed by the public eye on the council's website. Can you please ensure that your microphones are turned on when speaking and off when others are speaking? And can you please speak into your microphones, please, just so that we can all hear, and also for the benefit of the people that are tuned in online, that they will also be able to hear. And I would like to warmly welcome all councillors, officers and the public who are joining our meeting today, either here in the council chamber or online. So a warm welcome to you. Nice to see a good turnout as well. We will now begin to work our way through today's agenda. Item number 1 is the election of the chairman. As you all know, Councillor Nicky Manterfield is the chair of the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So it's normal practice for either Nicky or myself to chair these meetings, these joint meetings. As Nicky is unable to make it today, therefore you've probably drawn the short straw, and it's possibly myself today. So can we have are you all happy for me to chair this meeting? Can I have a proposal and a second, please? My second cousin, Councillor Mark, to propose it. Thank you, Mark. And sort of caught Bridget's caught me eye, sorry about it. Councillor Bridget Lee to second that. All those in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you kindly. Thank you very much indeed. We now have the election of a vice chair. Councillor Emma Baker is the vice chair of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and Councillor Stephen Cunnington is the vice chair of the Rural. As Stephen's not here today, can I have a proposer? Well, I'm going to propose Emma as the vice chair. Would you like to second it, please? I'll second. Mark, thank you kindly. So, all those in favour of Emma? Okay, thank you kindly. That's unanimous as well. So, Emma, kindly, please come and join me. We've got 4 items on the agenda today, folks. Well, four main items, I should say. And as we've now got Emma in her seat, I'm going to move on to item number 3, public speakers. I'm not aware of any public speakers today. Do we have any, Josh?
Thanks, Chairman. We've not got any public speakers today.
Okay, thank you kindly. Thank you for that. Item number 4, apologies for absence, please, Josh.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Nicky Manterfield, Councillor Vanessa Smith, Councillor Harish Bisnal Singh, Councillor Paul Wood, Councillor Richard Dixon-Warren and Councillor Stephen Cunnington. Councillor Trotter is substituting for Councillor Dixon-Warren and Councillor Lay is substituting for Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Okay, Josh, thank you kindly for that. So there's no other apologies to come our way, some aware of. Okay, no other members got as aware of any? Okay, that's fine. Okay, item number 5, disclosures of interest. Do any members have any interest to disclose? Disclosures can be made throughout the meeting as well. Any members have anything to know? Okay, That's fine. Then we'll move on. Agenda item number 6. This is the background presentation about planning policy, strategic planning. This is a report from Emma Whitaker, our Assistant Director of Planning. However, I'm going to hand to Councillor Philip Dilks first to introduce this item.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors and officers and everyone. I just wanted to say a little bit about why we're here, because as colleagues have said to me, several of you have said, we haven't done it like this before. Well, we haven't. But since I've been Cabinet Member for Planning, I've been aware that some sort of reports on how the Planning Department have been doing come to Planning Committee. Traditionally, they've come to Planning Committee. And it's fair to say, I think the Planning Committee their role is to determine planning applications that come before them. And that's their job, their role, they do that. And they did it last week. And I think it was right at the top of the agenda before any applications was a review of KPIs within the Planning Department. And it got moved down the agenda for very good reason to the end of the agenda, because there were a lot of members of the public here to listen to applications and so on. And it gets moved, and then we got to 5 o'clock, right at the end. Some members, I think, had probably already left. And, somebody says, oh, we've all read that, I propose that we take that as read. Thanks very much. And so it didn't really get scrutinised at all, in my view. And we've had, today we've got 3 reports on the agenda before you. The annual monitoring report, for example, is a really substantial document. There's a lot in it. It's a heck of a lot of work to produce. And the last time it was, looked at by, or the last one that was looked at by the Planning Committee, exactly the same thing happened. We got to, I think it was actually at the end of the agenda, people had worked through a lot of planning applications, and by the time they got there, it was given a couple of minutes and moved on. And I thought, blimey, this is a heck of a report that really should be properly scrutinised. When I discussed it with colleagues on with the officers on the, who look after the Constitution, our monitoring officers, we looked through the Constitution, and it actually says that scrutiny of planning should be through a joint committee. And again, colleagues have said, well, why is it these 2 committees? Well, frankly, that's what it says in the Constitution. It should be these 2 committees that are here today as a joint meeting. So that's why we're doing it. If we want to change the Constitution, that's another sort of issue. We can do that to make it include housing, if that's what you want to do. But it is the way that you want to scrutinise what happens in planning. I think it is part of, when this administration came to office, we promised, and we stick to, we've got a commitment to improving accountability, scrutiny and transparency, and that's what this is about. And I hope you'll agree that this is, once we've got through today, that it is a worthwhile exercise to do. Obviously, it's the first time we've done it, so we can tweak it. How often should we be having these meetings? That's up to you as to, how much you want to scrutinise, or if you don't want to do it this way again, let's change the Constitution. I think I've probably said enough. And introduce, I think Emma and Shazza, supported by Phil, are going to give us a background presentation on planning policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I'm not going to say much about this particular item because I've got Shazza Brannan and Phil Jordan who manage the development management and the planning enforcement teams for me. So they've prepared a short presentation just to talk you through the processes that we go through, because I'm conscious that while some of you sit on our committee in terms of planning, some of you don't, so it might be sort of slightly unfamiliar territory. And then with the Chairman's indulgence, we'll have a short questions and answer session afterwards if there are any. So I'll hand over to Shazza and Phil. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give an oversight on planning policy, including the local plan, and then Phil will give an oversight on development management and enforcement. Planning in England is policy-led. At the national level, the planning policy abides by the National Planning Policy Framework. The most current was published in 2023, and associated planning practice guidance. And then flowing down from that, at the local level, as a planning authority, we have to prepare the local plan and development plan documents, and we currently have an adopted local plan in place. And then national government have also given the authority of parish councils and neighbourhood planning groups to produce neighbourhood plans, and once made they become part of the development plan to be taken into account alongside the local plan. So statutory development plan, whilst I know that the local plan is quite well known, the development plan is actually made up of a number of documents, including the local plan. Our adopted local plan runs from 2011 to 2036, and that was adopted in 2020. But it should also be known that the minerals and waste local plan also form part of our development plan, and that's produced by the county council. And then, as I said, we also have neighbourhood planning, and then supplementary planning documents. And we currently have supplementary planning documents that cover design, planning obligations, and you can also prepare supplementary planning documents for specific land allocations and sites as well. So we currently have one for the Rectory Farm development in Grantham. So looking at detail about the local plan, it sets a vision and framework for our future development up to 2036, and it was adopted in 2020. It contains a raft of policies, including site allocations, so locations for growth, for housing and employment. It also contains policies for development proposals, so when the development management team and planning committee are making those important decisions, they should be governed by the local plan. And it establishes key principles in which guide the location of development such as, and design as well. But also it is to protect our natural environment. It seeks to protect our historic environment for the current and future generations. So when a local plan is prepared, it must be robust and it must be evidence-based. It must be soundly prepared, and as you can see, there are a lot of kind of projects which feed into the local plan. There's a statement of community involvement, and that governs, it's prepared by the council, but it governs how we consult on the local plan, and there are regulatory stages for consultation. We've touched on supplementary planning documents. There's a local development scheme, which again is approved by the council, and that sets out a timetable for local plan development. There is a really wide-ranging evidence base, which informs each individual policy. So, for example, there's flood risk evidence that's prepared, there's open space and sports evidence that's prepared, and that all feeds into the local plan and is published alongside the local plan as well. So the public and stakeholders can see the evidence behind the policies. It's a regulatory requirement to produce a sustainability appraisal and habitat regulations assessments, and those are prepared and at each stage of local plan preparation to ensure that the local plan is sustainably prepared and doesn't have impact on any national and internationally recognised habitats. And then the local plan must also obviously abide by national policy as well. The council has a legal duty to cooperate with neighbouring councils to ensure that our plan and their plans are positively prepared, and any joint working is done collaboratively as our local plans and neighbouring local plans are prepared. So an overview of what the local plan contains. One of the major policies is the settlement hierarchy, which again is evidence-based, and the settlement hierarchy currently includes the focus of development to go to the 4 towns, and then the larger villages which are defined within the local plan. And that's where site allocations are steered towards, because they are evidenced as being the most sustainable villages and towns within the district, and then appropriate development is steered towards the smaller villages as well, where appropriate. Local plan plans for growth across the whole plan period up to 2036, including housing and employment. The adopted local plan allows for 650 new homes each year, with 16,125 homes to be built within the plan period. To ensure that we meet that target, we also include a buffer. So you can see in that table that that with the buffer, our total supply is around just shy of 19,000 homes. And the table also sets out the distribution of development, with Grantham as our main town and sub-regional centre to have around half of growth. And then next about 20% in Stamford, and then the Bourne and the Deepings and the larger villages. And the local plan allocates sites to those locations. The smaller village development comes through as speculative development, where appropriate and where in line with the development plan. The local plan also allows for 179 hectares of employment land to complement the housing growth. And there are also policies within the local plan that guide that employment growth to the most appropriate locations. Land allocations are included within the local plan, and that's for housing and employment, and that's for all types of housing. We currently don't have any allocations for gypsies and travellers, but the local plan does allow for speculative development with regards to our gypsy and traveller community. So the growth identified, as I said, is known as allocations, and they set defined sites where, in principle, development is acceptable, but those sites, as any of the others, would need to, go through the planning application process for the finer detail. And all our sites that we've allocated undergo a robust assessment to ensure that they are suitable, achievable, and deliverable. So it's a very robust site assessment process, and all the evidence, as I said, is available alongside the local plan, so that our assessment process can be seen in detail. And then within the policy, to complement the allocation, we usually have a set of development principles which any planning permission would have to abide by. So, for example, surface water drainage or biodiversity. So, as well as the site allocations for planning applications to be determined, there are also a wealth of policies within the local plan, including environmental, renewable, infrastructure, community facilities and retail policies, but that's just a number, just a few out of the policies that the local plan contains. So as I said, the local plan was adopted in January 2020, but as a planning authority we are required to keep our local plan up to date, and when the local plan was examined, the inspector determined that we had to undergo a review to look again in detail at our employment land provision, our gypsy and traveller accommodation, because I said that we didn't have any allocations within the local plan, any housing need changes, and to take into account the current national planning policy framework, and a new national planning policy framework is expected imminently. So the review that we're currently working on, the process began shortly after the local plan was adopted, and as you can see, there are a number of regulatory stages that we have to hit, and with those regulatory stages comes public consultation and stakeholder consultation as well, and then that culminates in a public examination by an appointed government inspector before it is adopted and adopted by full council. So the first stage of the review was issues and options stage, and that determined the scope of the plan, and we also published a call for sites calling for housing land, employment land and gypsy and traveller accommodation land as well. And then earlier this year we published a full draft local plan for consultation, and quite a lot of evidence fed into that. We included new policies, including biodiversity, net gain and climate change. We updated some policies, and we also had some new policies as well. So we had a really good response rate for our full draft consultation, and we're currently going through all the responses received and then taking those comments into account to produce the new version of the local plan. So that's what we're doing now. We're processing representations, we're making changes, and we are also awaiting publication of the new MPPF, because that's going to be integral in the direction that we go with our plan. Is expected 19th of December, so next week. So watch this space.
Thank you, Shazza, and good morning, members. So development management, what is that? In short, determining planning applications. That's probably the simplest way of explaining it. How do we do that? The law tells us that we have to determine planning applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So what's the development plan? Shaz has already explained that. It's made up of the local plan, neighbourhood plans and the county minerals and waste plan. I think the important point there for members that often gets overlooked, neighbourhood plans and local plans have the same status in that piece of law. So neighbourhood plans where communities do have them are very important documents in terms of deciding planning applications. What are material considerations? There isn't an exhaustive list. Essentially it's anything that's relevant to the determination of the planning application, but the courts have determined that we're predominantly interested in land use in the public interest. So what that tends to do is exclude private interests or things that purely affect the private individual, and the usual example is private views, which is not a material consideration. But other important considerations, national planning policy, supplementary planning guidance, such as the design guide that the council has, they're all material considerations. In terms of numbers, we determine about 1,200 planning applications a year. The vast majority of those are determined under delegated powers. About 5%, probably about 60 applications go to planning committee and are determined by members of that committee. And then on top of those 1,200 applications, there's around about another 1,300 associated applications that we get, and they're things that can often relate to the conditions, amendments to existing applications, and applications to trees, things like that. Planning enforcement, what is that? Planning enforcement, we're primarily interested in two things. One, ensuring that development has planning permission, and secondly, that where development has planning permission, it's being carried out in accordance with the planning permission that it has. What's development? So that's the starting point. We get lots of allegations of breaches of planning control, and the first thing we have to establish is what is what's happening actually development, and that's the legal definition there of development. So building, engineering, mining or other operations, and then importantly material changes of use of land and buildings as well. What doesn't it include? In most cases, internal works, changes of use within the same use class. So importantly now, the most recent changes to the use class system created a use class E, and you'll find that in most town centres most uses are in that class E, and that's all designed to allow changes of use to happen without needing to go through the planning process. So previously class E was made up of all sorts of different sub-uses, but now you can change from retail to a cafe and back, for example, without needing to go through the planning process. Permitted development rights, so once we establish that something has or is development, there's then a whole series of things which are pre-granted planning permissions, and that's governed by the permitted development order. So if something already has planning permission through that development order, it doesn't need to come to us for a further planning permission. And that allows things like small extensions to domestic properties, certain changes of use, and then minor developments such as fences up to a certain height and so on. In terms of numbers, we receive about 300 cases a year, and they're made up of unauthorised development, breaches of conditions, so where we've granted planning permission but someone's not sticking to the conditions, changes of use of land, a lot of unauthorised works to listed buildings, and also unauthorised works to trees. That's all the slides there, thank you.
But if you want to add anything to that? Okay. Well, thank you very much to Shazza, Emma and Phil for that presentation. Now you know why we call it planning. There's a plan for everything, isn't there? Just to say as well, I'm pleased to see that we've got quite a number of the planning committee members here today. Our planning members undergo thorough training to be on the planning committee. In fact, they can't sit on the planning committee unless they are trained. I'm currently not on the planning committee. However, during the pandemic period, I was on the planning committee for 4 years. So I have a little bit of experience there on the planning. I'd just like to say that, you know, it is a difficult subject, planning. It's not easy at all. And we are reliant in many aspects, you know, for our officers. And we've got some exceptionally good officers on the planning committee, I have to say. So, you know, we do appreciate their efforts and input. And I say, I just think that was a good overview, and I hope that was helpful to the people that's watching and listening online. So, yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I'd just like to ask, is there any questions from our members? Councillor Sarah Trotter.
Yeah, thank you, Phil and Shazza, for the presentation. Just want to ask about, I know obviously you're probably just waiting for the national planning framework to hit the deck. Will it completely throw up what our plans for the local plan? I mean, obviously as a rural councillor, my particular worry is for the smaller villages. Do you envisage that a lot of open countryside probably will now go for planning? I mean, obviously you haven't got a crystal ball, but we hear so much at the moment today about all these houses that are going to get built. Where is the question? Thank you.
So the scope of the local plan was determined when we started in 2020, and that determined that that development opportunities would be steered towards the towns and the defined larger villages, and the scope of the local plan, has been determined and that is still in place. When the consultation version of the MPPF was published, it indicated that South Kesteven would have that our housing requirement per year would be 912 dwellings. It's currently in the local plan, it's currently 650. So that is a big uplift, and to meet those numbers we will need to find additional land. So whilst the scope of the local plan may not be changed, may not need to be changed, what we will potentially need to do is find more land, but within the scope of the agreed settlement hierarchy. So unless a decision is made by the council to change the scope of the plan, but that would involve going right back to the beginning, then it will still be in line with the settlement hierarchy, which does not allocate land towards the smaller villages. However, appropriate speculative development could still come forward.
Thank you, Shaz. I've got Barry next, and then Robert has indicated to speak, and then Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and thank you for the report. As you know what I'm probably going to say, but we did have a meeting planned with Shazza and with Emma. Unfortunately, couldn't attend Emma when we had it. But I did talk to Shazza about the location of proposed development, especially in my patch, in my ward. There's a lot of complaints there. We spent years, months, and a lot of money getting the neighbourhood plan produced. Not against additional buildings, but the houses. But the housing plan that you've put forward at the moment is in the middle of an existing agricultural area. It is in a very small, off of a very small lane. There are lots of issues that we have in Thirlby. That's on waste, and so again, the pumping station was developed for a very small, much smaller village. It's now absolutely at capacity. We see it happening through the winter months, especially when there's flooding. I just want to know, Phil, you told me, the local plan has priority over the neighbourhood plan. I don't get this. We've had the neighbourhood plan that's been developed. We spent over £8,000, and I don't know, thousands of hours, I think, between the community to get it ready. And I'm a little bit disappointed that we put this plot on the map and said that's where we're going to have the next development, without any consultation with the parish. I just wondered, how good is that? I think, Shazza, you mentioned when we had our meeting that is still open, and you've looked at Dole Wood, which is a historical woodland very nearby. It just seems to me a little bit confusing. We're not thinking of, there has been no proper consultation on that with the local people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I may jump in here, I don't think it's fair to say there's been no proper consultation. There has been rigorous consultation at Regulation 18 stage. We've had early engagement through issues and options. We've had an earlier version of a full draft earlier this year, and there will be further consultation through the Regulation 19 version, which is the pre-submission document. I think it's fair to say that whenever we plan for housing, somebody's always going to be a little bit disappointed because the field that they may want to see protected might not be capable of being protected in the future, and that's because we've got to put housing somewhere. And we've got to put employment sites somewhere, we've got to put gypsy and traveller sites somewhere, we've got to plan for sustainable growth in the district, and that means that we have to look for the best sites that are available to us, and they have to be available to us through developer or landowners putting them forward and promoting them through that call for sites. So part of the evidence base that we look at when we plan is looking at site assessments, and it will have looked at all of those sites that came forward, and the idea is that we pick the best sites, but we've got to find some sites. It is still open because we haven't yet got to that Regulation 19 stage, and there will be further opportunity for consultation. It's no easy decision. Any site, we sit there as officers and we look at what we think are the best sites, we get the evidence, we speak to the consultees. So we will have engaged, I hear your point about the sewage station being at capacity, but we will engage with the statutory providers and they will feed into their particular process. Developers are required to mitigate the impacts of their development, and if that means there needs to be more or additional pumping station capacity, then that's something that would have to be factored into that planning policy or subsequent permission. Just turning to the point of the neighbourhood plans, it's a bit complicated because the local plan takes supremacy, and then if a newer plan comes along, such as a newer adopted or made neighbourhood plan, that's the newer plan, and then our local plan might get revised, at which point our plan is the newer plan. So it's not a case of ignoring those documents, it's just the order in which they come to us. But everything needs to be in accordance with each other. So a neighbourhood plan must be in accordance with the council's local plan, and all of that needs to be in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework. So there is a golden thread that runs through. So I think, in short, lots of consultation, still consultation to come. We do have to put housing somewhere, so we do have to find those best sites. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. But before I do, can I just ask members if you could just speak into your microphones, please, when you are talking. I appreciate that you probably want to turn towards the person that you're directing the question to. Also, I didn't actually formally introduce Councillor Dilks as the Cabinet Member for Planning, so pleased that Phil's here today. So Phil's going to come in a moment, but I'll give you the chance to come back first, Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope that's better now, if I can raise my voice as well, but it has no intention of what I'm going to say now, in relation to what I'm going to say. But it would be nice, it would be a good idea to talk to the local parish council and members to see where we think, because the one that we're talking about in Thirlby is away from any other development at the moment, but there are other places that I think would be excellent, that people would be much more positive about that development. So, you know, if we could arrange a meeting at some time, I'm sure we'd get something resolved.
Barry, thank you for that. Councillor Dilks, Philip.
I mean, we'd certainly welcome these additional sites or alternative sites, I think. And I do sympathise with Sarah and all ward members. You know, if you've got in the draft local plan that has come out that we've had 1,500 responses to, and a lot of those are from parish council. So we are engaging with parish. We want to engage. This isn't about imposing it, but it has got to go somewhere, because we all know that both the previous government in the election campaign, the two big parties each promised 1.5 million houses in 5 years. Now, I've got to say, I don't know how they're going to achieve that. I think it is a huge challenge, to put it mildly, but that's what they're going to be, the new government is going to be measured on, which is why they're coming forward with, the reforms to planning now. And, the local plan itself takes 5 years, and there's consultation at every level of that. So, we keep going back and saying to people, this is what, we're thinking of doing, what do you think? So it's not about doing it to people, it is about doing it with them. But the houses have got to go somewhere. It is a national, and we can't get away from that. We can't say we're not going to play. We have to, and if we don't play, the government will intervene and say, well, we'll take over planning in South Kesteven. We'll do it. So we've got to cooperate with whoever is in government and whatever the new rules they are going to come out with, and how many it is a challenge. Where are we going to put these new houses? At the moment, we're building 550, 600 houses a year, and although it's in the previous we expected it to go up to 600 and whatever it was. The talk is now over 900 a year. It is a real challenge. But a lot of the work is going on with Emma and the team, and we're looking at how can we make that work in the best possible way. Yes, it's a challenge for all of us, Barry, But if I may just sort of say, I remember when I first became a district councillor, dozen or so years ago, I went back to my parish council, you know, and said, yeah, this is the plan. In the new local plan at the time, they want X number of houses, and the Deepings is going to have 200, 300, whatever it was, you know. And I remember one parish councillor who rather elderly had been there a very long time, he said, "Councillor Dilks, you just go back to Grantham and you tell them we're full." But it doesn't work that way, does it? You know, and you know, Deeping, like everywhere else, has had, you know, quite a lot of building, and there's going to be more to come. That is part of all our challenges, I think, Barry. You know, sorry, I'll shut up.
Okay, Barry, just very briefly, please.
Sorry, thanks, Phil. That's not what I agree with you, what we've got to do, but let's talk with the locals and see how we can get it done, where it is best to site those houses.
Okay, Barry, thank you. Phil, thank you. I'm coming to Robert next, then I've got Mark and then Pam on the list. So, Councillor Robert Lednam, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The planning allocation, I mean, only this morning I've had another email from the district group with a nice glossy brochure about their perspective or speculative plans for West of Grantham for 2,500 houses. And obviously, you know, it would be very nice. That's 2.5 years of your target in one fell swoop. You know, nice when you can tick it off. But that particular parcel of land was looked at under this consultation and rejected. I can understand completely why it would be rejected, because it's lowlands and it's a floodplain. And building houses on there, to me, would be absolutely daft. I mean, I went through there this morning on that road, and it is lakes. So, why? But they've also now contacted me about employment land down at Gunnerby Moor, wanting to meet up. And unfortunately, with the, you know, the current government's policy, it really is opening up the floodgates for all these prospective planning applications. And I'll be fair to Vistry. I mean, they did say to me that they know it's not going to be this year, next year. It could be 5, 6 years before, if anything. And I know that Emma and her team are sending out emails and communications about the contact from Vistry, which is much appreciated. But, you know, I'm a little bit concerned that somebody offering to build 2,500 houses would take the pressure off the planning department for 2.5 years in one fell swoop. And it's easy, and, you know, there's a lot of little villages around there which are very concerned. Now, the other point is, go back onto what on Phil's presentation, on enforcement. I've had a number of occasions where I just sit there and I don't understand how enforcement does work, because I've had a lot of issues in my ward with children's homes. I reported work being carried out with no planning permission at Walsall by Beaver on Castle Farm, and then 3 months later they finally put a planning application in, and because they'd put a retrospective planning application in, enforcement wasn't prepared to do anything in case that the planning application went through as approved, even though they breached it 3 months earlier. I'm not quite sure when enforcement comes into enforcement when I've reported an issue, and then being told 3 months later, well, they put a planning application in, it'd be a wasted officers' time and money if they grant it. That to me is, I don't understand. And Emma, you know about one or two of the other ones where I've had problems with enforcement, with the rookery. I think everyone in your planning department knows about the rookery, especially on enforcement. And then, of course, I think it's Chapel Lane in Barrowby. That was, you know, tree preservation orders and pylon-in and everything else. And there just doesn't seem to be any, like, black and white rules on enforcement. And, of course, as ward councillors, we get a lot of communications. You know, as you know, the rookery, that caused quite a lot of communications. Where I had to intervene to try and, you know, cut down on the amount of correspondence your teams were getting. But I just want to know, on the enforcement side of things, you know, I was told a few months ago that was on about having a workshop by the enforcement team, or to explain how things are, work. If you can give me any more, daylight on that, thank you.
Okay, Emma?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I'll take the speculative approaches. I should say it's really difficult, and I appreciate you've all probably got an enforcement query or a development interest in your sort of ward. It might be easier to have some of these conversations outside of this meeting, because otherwise we could be here for quite some time, and also specifics are difficult, and I don't necessarily have everything committed to memory. But in terms of the approaches from developers, they're going to keep coming. I can't stop them from coming. The government has been very clear with its ambitious housing targets, and of course, if we do need to take a step back before we can go forward with the local plan, we're going to have to look at finding more housing sites. And of course, these developers are going to want us to pick their sites. I'm not going to make a particular statement on the suitability of that site or otherwise, because it's premature for me to do so. I don't yet know what the MPPF is going to say next week. I don't know what it means, and obviously we've got to do a very thorough job looking at the evidence and actually thinking critically about what it means for us. But I can't stop those speculative approaches, and it's really difficult to say, please go and engage and feed back to those developers, but you might not want that development coming forward because it's not in the local plan. The best thing we can do is we can get an adopted local plan, we can maintain a housing land supply, because if we've got a 5-year housing land supply and our officers and the planning committee are approving sustainable development promptly, then we are protected from those speculative developments that are coming forwards that are not allocated in that local plan. So that's the best thing that we can do as a council. In terms of enforcement, I won't go into the specifics on those particular details here because it's not appropriate, but if I just talk you very broadly, serving an enforcement notice is a draconian last resort. It is not the first thing we should be doing unless we've got an urgent need to go and serve a stop notice, and they are not very frequently served for lots of good reasons. What we do is we have to go and investigate, we have to establish it's an issue, we have to go and talk to the owner. We have to, where there is a breach, we have to give them the opportunity to try and resolve that breach voluntarily, and it might be that they remove whatever is the offending issue, it might be that they submit an application for planning permission to try and regularise the situation. The enforcement team will not take action in the middle of that process because they don't yet know what the outcome of the planning process is going to be. Why would we serve an enforcement notice to say you've got to stop that use, you've got to take that building down, if we're still considering that process properly through the planning application stage? Once that application has been determined, either the case will be closed because the breach has been resolved because it now has planning permission, and that might be subject to conditions that make that particular issue acceptable, or it might be that we go to serve an enforcement notice because it's been through the planning process, permission's been refused, it's now time to serve an enforcement notice. And just to give you a flavour of the cases, October 23 to September 24, so a full year's worth of cases, 42% of all those cases we investigated, there were no breach to be found. 27% subsequently had planning permission granted, and 17% were voluntarily resolved. The proportion of enforcement notices served are very small, but it's for good reason. It's not because the team are not working and they're not working to try and resolve those issues. They are. It's just the enforcement notice is the last resort. I'm not saying that we shouldn't speed up sometimes, because I recognise it can be a very slow and painful process. But obviously the team are going through a huge number of cases. They've cleared an awful lot of backlog, and we've turned that corner. So hopefully it's just giving me a bit of a flavour for what the enforcement team do and why sometimes it seems like it's taking quite a while. But if you want to come and speak to me about specifics, then absolutely happy to have that conversation. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. Now, can I just give a very, very gentle comment, reminder to all fellow councillors, just be careful if you're going to refer to any particular site, or I know the planning members will be aware of this anyway, but you know, just be careful that you don't put yourself in an awkward situation should an application come to the committee and you have to go along and speak and you have to declare an interest or whatever. I just don't want you putting in. I'm sure you know exactly what I mean when I'm saying that. So it's just a gentle reminder on that, if I may, here. I hope that's helpful. Coming to Mark next. Councillor Mark Whittington, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Ledham contributions covered some of the things I was going to say, because obviously some of the areas he's referring to around the planning enforcement, whilst they're not in my district patch, are in my county council patch. So he has been including me in the process around this. I'm also been contacted by Vistry about the development of West of Grantham, but as a general point of principle, the Vistry proposal is on land that has previously been investigated and excluded from the local plan, as Councillor Ledham has said. So, as a point of principle, it's previously been rejected. If the housing target goes up, presumably we can go back to sites we've previously rejected and look at them again. Fair, okay. But we've also got, this site is being badged as a garden village. That's something completely different. Not being attached to Grantham or not being attached to any other village. We've also got the barrack site in Grantham as well, which is also being badged as a garden village. Now, we're talking about, 9,000 houses in Grantham. So, does that mean attached to Grantham or within a certain vicinity of Grantham? Because these new garden villages that are being proposed around Grantham, they're not actually physically connected to Grantham. There is a space between the edge of Grantham where these developments are. So do they count as part of the Grantham target, or would they count as part of a village target? And it seems, and this sometimes is where I think a lot of confusion happens, because strictly speaking, the Vistry development west of Grantham is closer to Barrowby. In fact, it's probably closer to Sedgebrook, which is a small village, and the small village allocation is 74. So this is, clarity please, because this is why constituents contact us, because they see this stuff and they go, it doesn't make sense to them. How far from Grantham does the development have to be part of Grantham? But if it's closer to a small village or a large village, does it count as part of their allocation or part of the Grantham allocation?
Mark, thank you very much indeed. A very fair comment, and I did actually take the opportunity myself to have a look at the plans when they were in the museum, so very fair comment. Would one of our officers like to come back on that, or Philip, did you want to comment on that? Emma, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I might ask Shazza to just jump in and correct me if I've got something wrong. The site's not been excluded or found to be unsuitable insofar as, whilst I understand it was submitted to us previously, it doesn't fit in with the spatial strategy for the Vistry site, this is, because it's not part of that Grantham allocation, so that's why it's not been included thus far.
So, did you want to come back?
Every site has its issues and constraints. No site will be perfect. So if you look at the site assessment, you will see lots of issues that we have to consider, and they'll be rag-rated, red, amber or green. No site will be perfect. No site will come forward, all greens. If it was, it probably was built on quite some time ago, so there will always be other issues, but some of those issues are capable of mitigation. So drainage is capable of mitigation, highways is capable of mitigation, educational issues, you can build schools, you can do all of these things. That's part of what we have to look at when we allocate a site. But the reason that the Vistry site has not come forward as part of any of our considerations thus far is because it doesn't fit in with our spatial strategy. The Garden Village at Spittlegate does abut the boundary of Grantham, so it is included as part of Grantham target, as does the Barrack site. So they would both be part of that Grantham distribution, but the Vistry site would not. I think we're getting ourselves slightly ahead. I don't yet know what the MPPF is going to say next week. I don't know whether we're going to have to take a step back, whether we're going to have to revisit that spatial strategy, or whether we keep going with that spatial strategy. But as I said before, the best thing we can do is we can approve sensible, sustainable developments when they come forward, maintain that housing land supply position, and have an up-to-date local plan. If we don't, and we don't have those those things in place, then when you get those speculative developments, the planning committee is asked a slightly different position, because you have a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that is when those other sites come forward, those speculative sites, and we have to make those difficult decisions whether to approve those when they are not allocated in the plan. So I think it's complicated, but we're not. You know, we've got to follow a process, and so hopefully that's helped a bit there. Does Chaz want to add anything, or was that? No, thank you.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. I'm just conscious of the time, folks, just to say that we've nearly had an hour of the meeting so far. I'm going to come back to Mark, and Pam's lined up as well for a question. I just want you to be aware that we've had nearly an hour, because we've got some important items on the agenda still to come. Mark, did you want to come back briefly, please?
Yeah, actually the second question, but hopefully we can deal with quickly. Looks like our housing allocation is going to go up by 262 houses to 912. We know, and I've been watching the fisheries, the Rectory Farm development. The building on that has virtually slowed down recently, because an awful lot of our building companies, have now got real cash flow issues. You've only got to look at the share values of the four leading building companies over the last month. They've all taken a nosedive. The new build housing market is collapsing. The housing market for houses that are currently there seems to be holding up fairly well. There's all kinds of issues around there. Governments can impose targets on us all they like, but if the developers don't build, what are we supposed to do? These developers are private sector companies. They are not going to build houses and put them on the market if they're going to make a loss on it, or if by carrying on development, they're going to drain their business models of cash.
Mark, thank you. I'm going to go to Pam next, please. Councillor Pam Bird.
Thank you very much. It's just returning back to the concept of the local plan, and the allocation obviously focuses on allocation for housing and employment land, and rightly so. But what does concern us sometimes is that it would be helpful to have allocation for other things, allocating the land for sports fields and for green space and wildlife, and particularly it would be helpful to note in advance where we might be able to allocate solar farms, rather than when some of these things come up, it's very much there's no plan for it, and I'm just slightly concerned that the landowner is obviously is motivated for the highest possible yield, but there is certain community infrastructure use of land that we don't seem to be able to plan for.
Well, Pam, you make a fair point, because times do change, don't they? And if we was looking back just a few years ago when the local plan came forward last time, solar panels weren't really talked about then, were they? So, you know, I think it's a very fair point you make there. Is there any of our officers want to come back on that, or Shazza, please?
The local plan doesn't allocate land for renewables. I know that the new government's agenda does include now on-site wind and solar, so that's something that we perhaps may need to look at in the future. And regarding your other query about allocating for other uses, so local plans don't tend to allocate for open space, but within it does include policies for sports provision and open space provision. So any permitted site will have to abide by the policies and provide that open space through the development, and the policies also protect existing open spaces as well.
Shazza, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to Philip as well, and also to Emma. Well then, folks, no more questions. We're going to swiftly move on. Oh, sorry, Paul, I didn't see you, mate. Councillor Paul Martin.
Morning. Just a quick one. Can we have an update on the NPPF changes as soon as you've gone through it all, and because I presume releasing it a week before Christmas is obviously, it's probably not going to be good news.
I think that'll be very helpful, actually, Paul. Yes. Can we have one of those, please, Emma?
I'm so glad you said as soon as we've digested it. That was going to be my response. Yes, there is a lot about to come out of government as well, because there's also some reforms they're going to be consulting on in relation to the planning committee structure. There's a little bit of that in the press, and a new bill next year. But absolutely, we'll prepare a briefing note as soon as we are have digested it. But it will probably after Christmas, if that's okay with councillors. Thank you.
I think it'll be a little bit difficult to get it done before, Emma, so yeah, we appreciate it when it comes.
If I could just say, if I may, Chairman, you know, it's a really important, we're obviously all waiting with bated breath as to what it's going to say, and the implications are, you know, massive for how we progress the local plan review. We're hoping that we're going to be able to get that local plan review to the inspectorate before May, June in the coming year. So, you know, it's a huge challenge for the planning team, and they've been Emma and the whole team have been sort of looking, you know, as to what if, you know, in the whole way through. So there's a lot of challenge to come, you know. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you for. But if you want to come back, please, Paul.
Very quick. Do you have the resource to cope with that, or is the council going to try and help you out to try and the resource, the correct consultations and people?
We'll work it out. What we do rely on is a lot of external consultants that support that evidence process. So we've got a fabulous team, and we'll digest what it's telling us first, and then we'll work out if we need any additional resources. But I'm sure we'll be fine. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much. By the way, I heard a little sneeze at the back, so I hope our chief exec's okay. Okay, we're going to swiftly move on, folks, to the next item on the agenda, which is an important item. It's item number 7, Annual Infrastructure Funding Statement 2023 to 2024, and Section 106 update as of November 2024. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Philip Dilts, the Cabinet Member for Planning, and I hope, especially for the benefit of people that's watching online, that somebody will just give us just a brief outline of what a 106 agreement is, please, because I'm sure that will be helpful.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to present now the first of 3 reports to you today, to be to your Scrutiny Committee, and this is, as Chairman says, an update on Section 106 agreements and the Council's annual infrastructure funding statement. 106 agreements, or planning obligations as they are known, are an important part of the planning process, and as colleagues will know, they are used to secure necessary infrastructure improvements associated with development proposals to make the development sustainable and acceptable. The Council is required to publish an annual infrastructure funding statement, which sets out details of completed planning obligations, as well as contributions collected and spent in the year. The preparation of this statement allows greater transparency around Section 106 agreements. Over the past year, our new Infrastructure Delivery Officer, Sarah Arnold, has commenced monitoring and recording the obligations and liaising with stakeholders to ensure financial contributions are properly spent under the 106 procedures. And she's also worked closely with Emma and Phil Jordan, who's already spoke this morning, to review our processes around monitoring of Section 106s. This has seen the introduction of new processes to ensure that all receipts and expenditure are more robustly monitored. These were the subject of an internal audit earlier this year, which found these processes to be sound. And the statement also includes details of some of these processes to help improve transparency and understanding by stakeholders. I'd also like to draw your attention to the Section 106 fund application form on page 55 of the report, which has been introduced this year and is designed to make the process of applying for Section 106 funds more robust and easier to use. During the last year, the Council has also amended its administration and monitoring charges undertaken to monitor planning obligations on a cost recovery basis. This income supports the Council's ability to effectively monitor and manage the whole 106 process. Highlights from this past year include a total of more than £500,000 of contributions being secured through new Section 106 agreements signed in 23/4. Over 1.8 million of contributions were spent in this period. 175 affordable dwellings were completed, with a further 48 secured for future delivery. The Council also collected nearly £6.3 million in contributions that were due. The report provides further details about some of the things that have been delivered, as well as information about the contributions held by the Council for future spend. I would particularly like to thank Emma, Phil and the whole planning team for their work in the preparation of the infrastructure funding statement, and request that your committee reviews the document prior to its publication. Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to go to some questions. Councillor Paul Martin, you'd like to go first? Thank you.
Thank you. Bring this over to the microphone. Okay. Section 106 as it exists at the moment, I struggle to see on the Section 106 at the moment how, for instance, in Grantham, any monies are allocated which could be used to upgrade, enhance the leisure centre, for instance, as the numbers in the town grow, because obviously we're going to have thousands of new people here. From what I can see at the moment, I can't actually see how money gets moved from, say, a site-specific, like Poplar Farm, and will end up increasing the leisure facilities at the leisure centre site of the Mears. I was just wondering if you could let me know how that works.
Thank you. So when we determine a planning application, you need to make a decision at that time what infrastructure asks and needs are required to make that development acceptable. And that can be education, health, highways, affordable housing. It can also be leisure and open space. So the Poplar Farm scheme, for example, the next phase, I think, will come with some sports pitches, and that's one way of increasing the amount of development, amount of provision we've got within the vicinity of the site. You can absolutely make arguments for improvements to leisure centres, but you've got to be looking at enhancing capacity, because it's about the strain of the new residents on the existing facilities. And then what, do we need a new leisure centre? Do we need a bigger leisure centre? Do we need more sports pitches? Those are the sorts of questions that we need to ask. Once we've done and dusted with the planning permission, we've signed the 106 and we've collected the monies, you can't divert it from one area into something else. It's got to be, it's ring fenced for the infrastructure ask that was needed and identified at the time. So a lot of what you're talking about is probably forward-looking rather than backward-looking. But we do look at these as we go on, and when we're looking at things like the Garden Village, it will come with sports provision again, and we deal with that, and as with every large allocation. And certainly Stamford North, that the planning committee we looked at last week, again comes with open space and sports pitch provision. So it is factored in, but you've got to be very careful about trying to divert old funds to something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Just to add, if I may, I mean, I would really encourage, town and parish councils to consider, in looking at the future, the local plan review that we're looking at, and some of the allocations in there that, still yet to be finalised, is, if we are going to get new build in our village or town, what do we want? What do we as a town or parish council want? So it's almost, I would welcome shopping lists to say, this is what we top priority in our town or village, and liaise with the planning team on that. Can't always deliver it. If there are rules around what it can be used for, as Emma said. But we again, it's the business of, we don't want to impose on. We want to deliver what people want.
Yes, please do come back, Paul.
Yeah, it's just obviously with the grant from Town Council being relatively new, they're obviously concentrating on lots of other things for the next year or two. They might not be aware that with the local plan coming soon, with the 50% allocation of housing to Grantham, that now is the time we need to be thinking of what facilities the entire town needs to grow. And it would be useful, I think, if we can kind of push them in that direction, or encourage them to actually think about this kind of thing. Just one other question on this kind of thing is, say you have 3 developments in the same town and all of them allocate 100,000 towards health facilities, and the NHS turn around and say, actually, we don't need health facilities in that area. What happens with that cash if it's not actually needed? Because I noticed here in Stamford, for instance, there's £233,000 allocated to health facilities, but I think it runs out in April. What would actually happen with that money? Do we keep it or do we have to hand it back?
Good question. Every legal agreement will have a clawback provision, so if that infrastructure ask is not called upon by the provider, then it will be returned to the developer.
Okay, Paul.
Really quick on that. So, is that £233,000 Stamford actually going to be used? Is there something lined up for that, or does somebody know they need to find a home for it?
A question better diverted to the NHS, who are in charge of providing our doctors' facilities.
But also, just to say, Paul, part of this monitoring and increased monitoring is to make sure that we're not giving the money back to developers and that it is properly spent. I don't want to go into the past, but it hasn't always worked that way. You know?
Okay, Philip, Emma, Paul, thank you for that. I've got Mark and then I've got Gloria on this.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just one point on the NHS. I sat on the Health Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire for about 4 years, and I did actually raise this issue at Health Scrutiny around 106s. The NHS in Lincolnshire seemed to be pretty, well, historically not very good at making Section 106 applications, and I know Councillor Dilson had involved with this as well, agreeing with me. You know, it then becomes very, very difficult because constituents always, whenever developments are being proposed, they say, "Oh, we need more hospital, provisional, doctors and dentists," and yes, we absolutely do. But if the NHS aren't making those requests, what do we do? That's one question. But my real question that I got in my mind was about Section 73s, because we can go down the road with a developer. We get a Section 106 agreement in place for X, Y, and Z they're going to provide. And then several years later, they come along and they say, "Oh, the financial figures have all changed now, and there's an issue with the financial viability of this site now." And they put in a Section 73 to mitigate some of the Section 106 requirements. You know, we have had cases in Grantham, the bridge to nowhere, I think, which we all know about. We know about the junction upgrades on the A1A52 junction, which, okay, they've been temporarily suspected. I don't know how long temporary is. But then residents come back to us as councillors and go, "Well, you're not doing your job, Mr. Councillor or Mrs. Councillor, because you're not holding these developers to account. What's going on?" They also have the ability to claw back as well. So it's always seemed to me that all the cards in this particular hand are all dealt firmly in favour of developers, and I find it incredibly frustrating. So, and then when I look at the numbers on page 20 of the report, and I see, okay, of the £6.2 million worth of contributions received in 23-24, the vast majority, 4.5 million, is education, and I'm pretty sure that is because of both the Poplar Farm build and the £2.2 million extension of the Walton Academy. So I can account for those two, and yes, they're definitely needed. But then when you see the transport, which would include highways, is under 170,000, and health, that's the NHS, 645,000 of that total. That kind of then, to me, emphasises the point that are these organisations that are supposed to be making these claims for Section 106 actually making the claims? Because, again, an issue, if you get one massive development, yeah, you can go in and get a fairly chunky Section 106 agreement. But if you've got 10 or 20 smaller ones with smaller developers, the net impact that they're going to have on the town is exactly the same as one big one. You then got to start negotiating lots of smaller 106s, and that's when things get missed. So to me, this whole process of 106, to me, seems like it favours developers over councils and over residents. And I don't know how we address that key issue.
Emma?
Thank you. So the matter of Section 106, the government is looking at, or the previous government was looking at reforming it, but that won't come in for a good number of years, and whether it's still on the agenda of the current government, I'm not entirely sure. But we're stuck with Section 106 for the time being. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you that it's weighted in favour of the developers, and I'll explain why. We work really hard to engage with those statutory consultees. Shazza does when she does the local plan, we do when we deal with planning applications. Developers will always push back, obviously, because they will want to firstly make sure that their developments are sustainable, and they'll want to make sure that they're providing what they need to provide. But they're businesses, and they'll want to look after their bottom line, no doubt. But we work really hard with those stakeholders to help them where they ask for contributions or on-site development, to make sure that those impacts are mitigated. So the Stamford North development, for example, and I'm only harking on about Stamford North because it was so recent last week, it is providing money towards the NHS or a site on the development itself, whichever the NHS wants. We've done that in conjunction with the NHS because that's what they've asked for. They are the best body to make decisions about what their future needs will be in line with population growth, not just natural growth, but also growth through the local plan allocations. It's not correct to say that Section 73, which for the benefit of non-planning committee members, that's the type of planning application made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act, where developers can come in and vary or amend a planning permission that's already in place. Sometimes we do get requests to vary things, and the one that you were referencing, Councillor Whittington, in relation to the Barrowby site is the is Rectory Farm, is the trigger points for the delivery of the highways improvements. Those highway improvements are still going to come forward. It was not on a viability basis. Actually, the evidence there was around the traffic modelling. Were those junction improvements actually needed prior to first occupation, or could the trigger be relaxed to 50 to allow the developers to keep building in the meantime? Every time we get such a request, whether it's during the course of the planning application or whether it is post-decision, to vary the requirements of a legal agreement, it is robustly tested. If it's on viability, we have an ask for a viability appraiser from the developers. We will get a third-party expert to appraise that and robustly appraise that, because we don't want to see cash contributions or on-site provision reduced. Sometimes it's around, is it still necessary? If it is purely on viability, then we have to make a decision. That scheme may not be okay if that infrastructure does not come forward, but that's a decision that we have to make when we're asked that question. So hopefully that's clarified a little bit for you, Councillor Whittington, but we do robustly test everything. We do work with those stakeholders, and I welcome, and I do have regular conversations with our colleagues at the NHS. I welcome a conversation with anybody that wants to talk to us about how they can improve that process and engage with us better. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much indeed.
But just say they are legal agreements. They're legal agreements, that the developer enters into at the start of the process. I know that we did go through a few years ago, on the viability, quite a lot of developers coming back and saying, oh, it's not viable. But I think we've got a lot more robust in handling those now. And yeah, that's not a political point in any respect. I think over the past few years, I think we've got better at handling those, and I think we do get less and fewer of those challenges to the 106 that they've already signed up to than we used to get. I agree with you about NHS. They didn't, again, we went through a period, I think, of NHS not applying, you know, not responding, saying, oh, no, we're okay, you know, and I think they've woken up to that now, and, you know, we do get more NHS requests.
Philip, thank you.
And it's all done to a formula, of course, you know, according to how many houses and, you know, what the, whether it's schools or whatever it is.
Philip, with the greatest respect, can you come through the chair, please? Okay, no worries. Okay, I just want to say that I think the point that Paul touched upon with regarding the town council, I think is a good point as one of the stakeholders. You know, I just think that you know, looking forward and moving forward, I just think that their input could be very, very important. You know, with 106 and so yeah, we'll watch this space and see how they get on. Is what I would say. I've got Gloria next, and then I've got Pam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to say that Councillor Martin brought up most of my points, and you've just reiterated what I was going to say. I think the most important people that you have to ask is the local councillors, because they are there, local councils, sorry, because they are there on the ground and they know their towns. And I think they should have more input into these 106 agreements. And going back to the NHS, I do know that they have been asked, and the schools have been asked, and they've turned around and said, no, we don't need anything. And yet the local people are saying the schools are full and they need this and they need that. So sometimes, as I say, I think the local councils are the people that they need to be spoken to more. Thank you.
Gloria, thank you. Okay, Pam.
Thank you. On a similar note, in fact, in terms of how we formulate some kind of local wish list for the Section 106 expenditure, there is a formula, but there are other things outside the formula that could be very beneficial within a community, such as, you know, it might be some infrastructure work or, you know, just different things sort of going on. Could be a contribution to leisure facilities. And because the formula kicks in, some of the other options don't seem to get sort of put on the table, because we're told, oh, well, it'll be this, this and this, and then we don't have the option. So I just wonder whether either or both, in relation to the upgrading or the review of the local plan, we're also going to have the review of neighbourhood plans. Could we not have something within the local plan and the neighbourhood plan that says this is our Section 106 sort of broader wish list, as it were, so that if those are statutory documents and the developer has to be mindful of the content, that the developer themselves is also aware and may be able to build something into the development, or at least they wouldn't put up a fuss if it says, oh, and also a contribution to this, that or the other, which is a local identified need. Thank you.
Well, personally, Pam, I think that would be a helpful addition. Anybody else like to comment on that? Emma?
If I may, thank you. We do have a supplementary planning document that relates to planning obligations. That will be reviewed once we've done the planning, once we've done the local plan. I don't think that's great in terms of identifying certain calculators, but there will be other things that through the lifetime of the local plan, if you imagine the next plan is going to go to 2041, that local town councils, the council, district council, other stakeholders, county council identified during that time period that you couldn't have imagined at the point of adopting the local plan in the first instance. So I think you almost need to treat these wish lists, as it were, if you want to call them that, as fluid documents. The neighbourhood plans are excellent vehicles for identifying certain pieces of key infrastructure. I know the Deepings already does have some things identified within it. I would say the best opportunity to deal with it is at that pre-application advice stage, where we can really focus on what the development is and what the needs are, because things do change, and it might be sports clubs. Typically for town and parish councils, it's going to be around the leisure facilities and your play equipment, or things that might come to you or come to the town and parish council through that development. you know, such as play parks. But always well happy to have conversations. Do have regular dialogue with some of the town and parish councils, and I've offered with town council. I'm just waiting for them to come back to us to take us up on that. So take your point. I don't think the ideal scenario is to have that complete list within the local plan, because it should be a living document. But definitely a bit more work to be done, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Paul.
Thank you. Just two quick ones, actually. Who actually defines what health services mean? Because obviously leisure and health slightly touch on each other. And also, could you explain what inflationary measures are used to protect the value of the S106 monies? Because some of these developments can take, say, 5, 10, even 20 years. And obviously the value put on S106 money at the beginning, by the time it's triggered, due to inflation, it may have changed significantly.
Good questions. So health in this sense is National Health, NHS asks. So it is your GP, it could be if they ask for it, hospital provision, but it's the NHS ask. So it's the things that they've asked us to deliver, because they've identified that there's a need that particular development needs to contribute towards meeting. In terms of the other point, in terms of the value of the contribution, we have indexation clauses in Section 106 agreements. They will identify a particular index that we need to use. Quite commonly, it's the BCIS, British Construction Index, something scheme probably, that means that the value of the contribution should hopefully be the same when we collect it as it was when it was originally asked for, and highways is an all-in price tender for highways. There's various different indexes, so we can use those, but we specify those in the legal agreement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've got a question that no one's picked up on as yet, and we probably really need a finance guy to answer this particular question I've got. I'd just like to understand how, I mean, all the monies from the 106 agreements, I mean, we're talking millions of pounds here at some point. They obviously go into an account of some description, and it does state in the report that at one point there was 7,762,000, and obviously that was over a period of time, but there's obviously a lot of money in a particular account at some particular point, and I'm just wondering about the interest on that. What happens with the interest on that, and how much interest is there on that? Because it must add up and mount up at some point. Anybody like to have a go at that one for me?
In terms, I think Miss Bradford would...
Chief Exec, I think. Karen Bradford, please. Sorry to ask an awkward question. Try the other. It's Ashley's laptop that's doing it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we do report to Council our return on investment income, and all I can say is our investment income returns are very favourable at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Has anybody else got any other questions? No. Okay. Right. Well, this particular it says the recommendation is that the Joint Environment and Rural Communities Committee reviews the infrastructure funding statement Appendix A prior to the publication. Are you happy that it's been reviewed and it moves forward? All those in favour that you are happy with it? That looks unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item number 8. Revisions and amendments to planning applications and extensions of time procedure for planning applications. And I've had a read through this myself, thorough read through, and this to me looks as if our planning officers are asking for a little bit of assistance on this. So I'm going to go to Councillor Philip Dilks, the Cabinet Members for Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce this second item on revisions and amendments to planning applications and extensions to time procedure for applications. As already mentioned today, planning reform is high on the government agenda, and it was clear from the King's speech earlier this year that the government aims to get Britain building, including through planning reform. The government has indicated that a new planning and infrastructure bill will be published early next year, with reforms expected to look at speeding up both local plan processes and decision making. The clear message from government is that they wish to, quote, accelerate the delivery of high quality infrastructure and housing. This means there will be an emphasis on improving the speed of decision making. Statutory time limits for decision making are set out in the planning legislation, and the Council reports performance quarterly to Government. As set out in the report before you, the Council has the ability to negotiate extensions of time to those statutory time limits. You'll see from tables 1 and 2 in the report that the Council is far more reliant on these extensions of time than our Lincolnshire colleagues and also our nearest neighbour authorities. Whilst the planning team is reliant on the use of extension of time, this is for a variety of reasons, including negotiation of amendments and completion of Section 106 agreements. The Council is not under any obligation to request or accept amendments to an application. Amendments can be requested by officers or submitted by applicants where they're wishing to respond to comments by third parties or statutory consultees. The Council offers a paid-for pre-application advice service, and it would be more appropriate to direct customers to that service so they can explore key issues and possible solutions earlier in the process. Using the pre-app application, the pre-app service as it is known, should improve the quality of applications when they are first submitted and hopefully speeding them up. The proposed amendments, revisions and extensions of time procedure will provide clarity to customers and officers alike about when it might be appropriate to seek amendments to an application and use extensions of time. This will provide greater transparency and consistency in the process. I would request that your committee reviews and provides feedback on the procedure and invite you to recommend to the Cabinet that the procedure is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Okay, I'm going to get in first actually on this time. I waited till last time. I'm going to get in first with a question. I'd just like to ask, how do we compare with the number of officers that we have in comparison to other district councils, and is that a factor at all?
Thank you. I don't have the stats to hand, and it can be difficult to do that comparison. But the last time I think there was a national comparison, we weren't dissimilar in terms of numbers of officers to overall numbers of applications that we receive. So I don't think it's a resourcing issue in that sort of sense. We've had a bit of a backlog that had been built up since COVID. The team's been working really hard to clear that. But I should point out that a lot of these times where we have to use the extension time, it's not because officers are being too slow themselves. Sometimes we're negotiating on applications, and sometimes the developers put speculative amendments in, which we accept. We don't have to accept them, and it will delay, and of course that in itself builds caseload and management issues. So I think it's for me, it's about having clarity in the process, but making it really clear the time to negotiate is at that pre-application stage or post-decision. But once you put the application in, 8 weeks is not a long time to determine an application by the time we've carried out those neighbour consultations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We certainly do need to encourage applicants to take that pre-app advice, don't we? And I think that's one of the things we need to be pushing for a little bit more. Councillor Mark Richardson. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, I think we've obviously got to wait until the MPPF is published on the 19th of December. It's not often I read anything that Angela Rayner writes, but she did actually write an article in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday on this. And reading between the lines, she was talking about the speeding up of the process. And certainly the message that I gleaned from the article that she had written was that there's going to be less input or reduced time for input into planning applications from local residents and local councils and councillors, which I'm really greatly concerned about. Because in some of the previous questions, some of the previous issues we've been discussing this morning, we've spoken about the importance of listening to local council, local councillors, the residents, the people on the ground. And it seems to be that in the push for this magic number of 1.5 million houses in 5 years, that the governments are prepared to almost, I wouldn't say ride roughshod over local democracy, but certainly to reduce the amount of time that local councillors, local councils and residents can have to actually input into the process. And my concern is that because the time limit is going to be reduced, there won't be a proper review locally of all the implications. We recently just discussed the Section 106 process, how complicated that can be. And my real concern over this, pushing for this chimera of 1.5 million houses, that actually an awful lot of democratic accountability locally is going to be ridden over in the push for this target, which I don't think can be achieved, because I just do not think the developers, the nature of the developers, private companies, they will only build houses if they can make a return on this. The market, interest rates, the general state of the economy is against people buying houses at the moment. I cannot see this happening, but my concern is over the impact on local democracy and local accountability. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'll go to the Chief Executive, Cameron Bradford, please.
Hello, I think I'll work this way. Oh dear, no, I don't want that name. Okay. So I stepped that one. No, just coming back on what Emma's just presented and what Councillor Whittington has just come back with. I think we need to be really careful that we don't muddle the two here. Yes, we've got housing targets, without a doubt, and we're under pressure to deliver on those housing targets. This is about the application process, and the application process is still going to be 8, it's still going to be 13 weeks. This is about the poor quality of applications that are coming into this authority, that time and time again we're having to have extensions of time to work with these developers to get the quality of the application where we can consider it and make a decision. If you look on page, and I'll steer members to it, on page 76, our nearest neighbours, as you will see, our SIP for peer group is approximately on the number of decisions that need to be taken, which is actually less, 808, and we're taking 997. On average, the number of decisions that require an extension of time is 376. We're giving 655 extensions. That, to me, says either the application was not of the standard that we require, or the applicants are coming in with too many amendments. If we then go to Lincolnshire, even more embarrassingly, the Lincolnshire average is 298, and we're running at 655. So there's a problem. We're being very consultative and very supportive of our developers. There's got to be a change in the game rules here. They've got to up the game, and they've got to either do the pre-application or have the quality of their applications better. And if we keep working to these extensions of time, we are missing key deadlines that the government are going to expect of us to provide how many houses that we need to provide. So I know that might sound a little bit passionate about this, but the statistics and the data speaks for itself around the quality and how our team are having to work with difficult applications. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's also as well 16 weeks with an environmental impact assessment as well. What percentage of applications do we have that would come into, please, Emma?
Not very many. It will be a big strategic sites and solar farms, so you're looking probably at less than 5% of all applications that would have an environmental assessment with them. The vast majority of what we do are householder, that's a large chunk, or minor developments, so they fall within that 8-week timescale. Major applications will be 13 weeks, but even then that's not a huge amount, and I think as Karen said, it's about getting those applications better at the point of submission. And just to come back on Councillor Whittington's point, the pre-app service is there, it should be used. It's not about taking away the ability to negotiate, to engage. It's about when you do it in the process. And 8 weeks or 13 or 16 weeks is quite frankly not a huge amount of time when you're looking at the issues that we're looking at. Thank you.
Emma, thank you kindly. Is any other councillors wish to ask a question on this, make a point? Sorry, Emma? Please do.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that then, so we're looking at these numbers and you're saying it's the quality or not using the pre-app services, but what do our neighbours and Lincolnshire use? Are they all using pre-app, or are they all getting good quality things in place? So I'm just wondering, is it because the applications are just coming in like that because we've not been pushing a service, or are they just quicker at handling it, I suppose?
Emma.
Thank you. It's probably a mixture of both, to be fair. A number of authorities have already brought this sort of process in, so they already have stated positions about not accepting amendments during the course of the application unless specifically requested by the case officer. Other councils will have, we don't have a huge take-up in terms of the pre-application advice service, and I would like to try and reverse that. So it is a bit of both, and one of the other things that we will be looking at is whether we should have a local validation list, because that's sometimes the other area whereby we don't get all the right documents in at the beginning. So it's not the only way of resolving this. It's one of a number of things that we need to look at, and certainly the local validation list or local list we'll be looking at in the next year. Thank you.
Emma, thank you. Thank both Emmas. Councillor Gloria Johnson. Gloria.
Thank you. Is there a charge for this pre-application service? And if so, how much is it? And could we make it that they have to go through it to make life easier all round for the applicator and for us?
There is a charge. It's agreed annually through the fees and charges process. It's on our website and it varies. So for a householder application, it will be, can't remember off the top of my head, but it's certainly probably in the region of about £80 for the pre-application advice request. For the larger schemes, it's going to be more because we spend a lot more officer time, and we obviously, when we have to look at the fees and charges, you're looking at cost recovering the time we spend on these applications. I'd love to make it compulsory, but sadly I can't, otherwise I would. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Well, if there's no further questions, the recommendations is referred to on page 79 through to 81. That's the revisions and amendments to the planning applications and extensions of time. The recommendation in the report, and we, as a scrutiny committee, we obviously only make recommendations to Cabinet, but it obviously states here, the committee is recommended to review and provide feedback on the proposed revisions and amendments to the planning application and extensions of time procedure, which I think we've given up some feedback there on that, and the recommendation is to the Cabinet that the procedure is adopted. So I'm going to propose from the Chair that we do assist our officers in this. It's got Robert, did you want to? No. Robert, thank you kindly for that. So I'm proposing it from the Chair, recommend that the Cabinet, to the Cabinet that the procedure is adopted, and it's been kindly seconded by Councillor Robert Lednam. All those in favour, please? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, right, moving on to agenda item number 9. And this is the Authority Monitoring Report, and I'm going to hand to Councillor Philip Dilks, the Cabinet Member for Planning, please, Philip.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. This is the most substantial of the documents before you today, I might say. I think it's full of information, the Authority Monitoring Report, which records how well the policies and proposals of our development plan are doing. It looks at whether we're meeting the timetables for preparation of the forthcoming local plan. There's 4 things that we're required to include in it, and they are an assessment of local plan policy against the local plan's monitoring and implementation framework, progress of the emerging local plan, progress of any neighbourhood plans in production, and any cooperation with neighbouring local authorities under the duty to cooperate. Unlike other monitoring documents, there's no deadlines to publish, just that we should provide our monitoring data as soon as we can. The report's a good way of providing our monitoring data in one document, and this one monitors the period 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 24. Headlines include details of our housing delivery, including the number of affordable housing completions across the district. During the monitoring period, 575 dwellings were completed across South Kesteven, of which 175 were designated affordable. Within the monitoring period, neighbourhood plans were also formally made for Caythorpe and Freeston, Claypole, Corby Glen and Rippingale. The document also provides details about the progress of our allocated housing sites, as well as information about gypsy and traveller provision. The progress of our allocated employment sites can be found at page 31. The table in Appendix 1 to the monitoring report provides a summary of whether the Council is meeting the requirements of the local plan policies, whilst appeal monitoring data is provided in Appendix 3. Officers will continue to monitor the indicators within the local plan's monitoring and information framework and will report our progress annually. I would like to thank Emma and the whole team, planning team, for the hard work that's gone into this substantial document, an important document. I certainly request that the committee reviews it prior to publication via the Council's website. I would also say, I think there's so much information in these reports that I would encourage all councillors to read and digest, because there's so much about your own wards within it, as well as the whole district. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. There really is a lot of information, as you say, in there, and the Council's got a statutory requirement to publish this. Let's say a lot of work has gone into this, so big thanks to everybody that has put the effort in on that. Councillor Mark Whittington, and then I'm going to come to Councillor Paul Martin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One question. During the period, we had 575 completions against our target of 650, which is obviously 75 fewer than our target. So presumably those 75 have to be, I guess, carried forward, all the balance, has to be carried forward into previous years. And I think this comes back to comments I previously made about this, that developers will only complete houses if it fits in with their own particular business plans and models, whether they've got the proper cash flows in their business and whether they can turn a profit on it. So it comes back fundamentally to the question I've asked before. We are so dependent upon developers who've got their own reasons, and they're private, as I said, they're private companies, and they're perfectly entitled to run their businesses as they best see fit. But potentially, you know, we haven't achieved this target this year, 650. That's got to be carried forward. So at some point, are we going to get a situation where literally we've got to produce so many houses in such a short period of time? And it comes back to this thing. Great to have a target, but if your target's not achievable because you're dependent upon a third party, i.e. developers, to do it, plus other ancillary issues such as the general state of the economy, interest rates, and a whole variety of other things, there's so much risk in that. And I'm still really concerned about this, because we can do everything we possibly can as a council. We can identify all these sites and our local plan everything. But we are just dependent upon the developers, and I still cannot see how this particular issue can be resolved. Thank you.
Any comment from our officers? No? Okay. We'll move on to Councillor Paul Martin.
Thank you. Neighbourhood plans. It's interesting to see the number of made plans here, as well as ones which are in process of being put together. The question I have is that obviously in Grantham we had charter trustees for some time and no town council. So we had no facility to actually create a neighbourhood plan. Now with 50% of housing allocation coming to Grantham, I'm just wondering what local protections are currently in place for various parts of the town, you know, the historic areas and such like. And it's going to take us probably 4 or 5 years to get a neighbourhood plan in place. So given that and the forthcoming tidal wave of housing, what protections can we put in place quickly, if they don't exist, for things like what I would classify as Grantham's green belt? How do we keep Grantham as a growing town, but make sure the areas that the local people want protected are protected? I'm just a little bit foggy on that.
Good question again, Paul. I think maybe it was one of those subjects that probably wasn't given enough thought in the run-up to us having a town council. Maybe we should have a little bit more foresight in that direction. Emma, would you like to come on that, please?
Thank you. Well, firstly, it's not correct that the charter trustees couldn't have created a neighbourhood plan, because they could. There's a mechanism that allows would have allowed that to have happened. You're also correct that neighbourhood plan will take a number of years to go through that particular process. In terms of protection, we don't have any green belt, I'm afraid. That's a very technical term in planning, so I understand what you mean, but it's not designated green belt. But in terms of those protections, that's what the local plan does. The local plan allocates the sites we want to bring forward in the right place, right time. If they're delivered, we've got a 5-year supply. We don't need those speculative developments. We can refuse them if they're not sustainable. In terms of the other things such as open space, again, they're protected. We've got conservation areas. That's a level of protection as well. So that's what the local plan does. It has those policies in place. The neighbourhood plan is just another layer that you can choose to have to amplify those local plan policies. It can't do something contradictory to the local plan, but it can complement and support those local plan policies and go into greater depth. We're also looking, and our urban design officer, and I'll do a plug for him for Wednesday's councillor session, I think it is doing some fabulous work on a design code for the district. We're one of the few authorities that are on the Pathfinder programme, and that's being funded, and that will be being completed by the financial year end, so March next year. And Wednesday we've got a session for councillors. We've been out to all the neighbourhoods, all the parish town councils. I think Shazza and the team were stood at Stamford Market in the rain on Friday to talk to local people. So that's another layer of protection, because it talks about when we have development, what's the right design, how should it fit in with the local area. So thank you.
Emma, thank you. Councillor Paul Martin.
Thank you for that. So, from a Grantham viewpoint again, obviously, the town is currently growing at a point where it's starting to swallow up surrounding villages, or threatening to. Some of those villages or parish councils are very small, and they're now facing very large developments within their areas. So they're now potentially going to go from over small parish councils having an awful lot of residents and potentially S26 monies, etc., etc. Precepts being set and such like. Is it possible, I mean, to redraw the boundaries of the town? This is going to be very controversial. In order to facilitate the town council's events and spending being taken into account for the local parish council's population. I'm not sure I'm making a point clear here. For example, if you look at the Sunningdale estate in Grantham, all the money from that area will go to London Fort Parish Council, but they're very much part of Grantham. So is it possible to reallocate designated areas, I guess?
Well, boundary changes, Paul, are undertaken every so often anyway, aren't they? I think Philip wants to come. Did Ashley, leader of the council, want to come in here, Ashley?
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting points. On the last issue, I don't think it's the scope of this meeting or this committee to talk about the kind of allocation of precepts and boundary changes and so on. We have had this situation in the deepings for many, many years, where the precept in Market Deeping is almost double the precept in neighbouring Deeping St James, even though many residents of Deeping St James, including myself, enjoy the Christmas lights and various other facilities, the Johnny Field, that is maintained and provided by Market Deeping Town Council. Nobody in the Deepings has ever pushed for any kind of unification between Market Deeping and Deeping St James. I'll offer no further comment on that. On the issue of the Charter Trustees, I think, not to split hairs, but the Charter Trustees, when they were, I don't think they could have implemented a neighbourhood plan in their capacity as Charter Trustees. That's not within the role or scope of Charter Trustees. What could have happened is that individual councillors from Grantham, who all happen to be Charter Trustees, could have taken it upon themselves to do a neighbourhood plan thing. And put me right if I'm wrong, Emma, any group of concerned individuals in any community can set off a local neighbourhood plan process and produce a neighbourhood plan as long as they have the mechanism to take it to a referendum.
Ashley, thank you very much. I think Philip wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I just Emma mentioned the design code workshop it's on Wednesday. I just wanted to advertise it, and I'm sure you would all be very welcome to it. It's in the Witham room, and it's Richard Shaw, the design officer. Is that the right? Design officer. I went to one of the presentations. They've been out on the road, had a bit of a road show, and they had one in. Where was it? It was Bourne, wasn't it, that I went to? And it really is worth going if you haven't been to one. On Wednesday it's 10 till 12, and I just recommend it. It's really good, and you can see some of the challenges, and you can say what you like and what you don't like about particular design aspects in your ward. So it's really quite good. We've already got a design guide that was brought in consultation with Rutland 4 or 5 years ago, and I think that has brought things forward and made things, improved things. But this code is going to sort of strengthen that process, and I think it's a really good thing. So if you're free Wednesday, we'll see you there.
Philip, okay, thank you. Is any further comment on this at all from any other member? No. Okay, well this authority's monitoring report, statutory requirements first to publish this. This covers the period from 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024. We've had a good discussion on this. It is recommended that the Joint Environment and Rural Communities Committee reviews the publication of the Authority Monitoring Report, Appendix A, and accompanying Summary Report, Appendix B, prior to the publication. So, do I have a proposal that we've done that, or that it goes forward, that to be published? Barry, all those in favour? That is unanimous. So, thank you very much indeed for that one. So that can now be, from our perspective, can be published. Okay, now next item on my notes, here we go, is item 10, any other urgent business. I'm not aware of any, and before I close, okay, Ashley,
Sorry.
Please do come in. Leader of the Council.
Thank you. Councillor Trotter did mention via email before the meeting that she might be able to either update or answer any questions about the recent announcement concerning Lincolnshire Police. I think it was this meeting. It might have been Thursday's meeting.
Yes, absolutely. More than, you know, Ashley, a bit breath of fresh air, you know, to have one of our members that's on an outside body to come forward and give us an outside report. I've been asking for this for quite a while, actually, that members do this. I know Sarah's done this in the past on the rules, and I'd be absolutely delighted, Sarah, if you'd just give us a little bit of feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ashley. I'm actually going to attend Thursday's meeting, which is solely the rural and communities, which obviously looks after the police and crime, etc. I know that Ashley has sent out a members' update, and within that was about, the wording is slightly different, but Lincolnshire Police is being put into special measures, sadly. This is about Her Majesty's Inspectorate, looks at all police forces and looks into different parts of the police. I will go into it more on Thursday, if that's okay. We've all had Ashley's update and it's got the link. I think a lot of it does come down to lack of funding, and we have argued and discussed many times. Councillor Dilks is the County Councillor, Police and Crime Panel member, to try, and we were hoping that this funding formula could be looked at and changed for Lincolnshire. As you know, Lincolnshire is a huge county, but unfortunately it's not an urban county where the money is funnelled into your conurbations such as Birmingham, London, Manchester, etc. Had a good read through it. I have it in front of me on Thursday. What I'll do is, obviously, I'll take any questions from members of the panel, the committee, and anyone else who attends. If I'm unable, you know, I probably won't be able to answer queries there and then. I can probably only answer some as a former police officer myself. I've had a discussion with Phil, and we have a panel chairman, Chris Cook, and he's an ex-superintendent. I was a lowly DC, but we have discussed some of the urgent matters. I think one of them was not investigating thoroughly and dealing with victims for sexual assaults, etc., which is worrying. There is a lack of detectives. For the more serious crimes, it is CID that generally in the old days would have investigated it, but nowadays, due to the lack, that there are a lot of new officers coming to the job, there is a lack of experience. So whether that's given cause for concern that the victims aren't being looked after. There is also strategic, in that money hasn't been used the best for the fleet of Lincolnshire Police. I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head at the moment. I should have had a word with Ashley and say I'll come on Thursday, but I can see as an ex-police officer some of the things that why it's been highlighted, and they need improvement, but how quickly that improvement, I do not know, with the lack of funding, lack of officers. Obviously, you've heard last week, there's going to be all these new PCSOs and police officers, neighbourhood. We've already taken on a lot of new police officers. It takes 2 years to train these police officers. I was in for 18 years, and it was a constant learning curve. So I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot to it. But if you read the document that Ashley attached, then that will give you a feel for why it is in special measures. And I think it won't be the first, unfortunately. But if anyone wants to email me or ring me, that's fine, and I will get the answers for you. And like you say, Ian, do try and give a bit of feedback at the rural and communities about what's going on in the police and crime panel. We have got an extraordinary meeting, which is on the 10th of January. So I think that's the place that we'll be able to find a bit, Phil and I will be able to find a bit more out. Obviously Phil's county, but we do communicate about what's going on the police and crime panel. So thank you anyway.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed for that. It does sound very concerning, it really does. I've not actually seen Ashley's correspondence as yet. I've had my head into this thick agenda that we've got here, you know, for today's meeting. I've also got another one just as thick for tomorrow's Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so it's hardly surprising I've had a chance to have a look at that, but I certainly will at my first opportunity. So, Sarah, thank you very much indeed for that, and also for giving us, you know, the notice that you're going to be given a little bit more information about that the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Thursday. What time's that meeting, please, Sarah? Sorry? That's at 10 o'clock for anybody that's listening or watching online. I'll say 10 o'clock. That should be an interesting meeting. I want to come to the Chief Exec next. Karen Bradford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just also wanted to actually say a bit more information about the relationship that South Kesteven has with Lincolnshire Police. I think it was fair to say 4 years ago it was not in a good place. Certainly now I'm very proud of the relationship that South Kesteven has with Lincolnshire Police. We get a lot of support from them. We got the massive amounts of funding from the Safer Streets for Grantham, which has been a 2-year programme. But the relationship where we can pick the phone up and say, Houston, there's a problem, or can we work on this together, or, you know, we're moving the CCTV unit from lone working where we are, which we won't say where we are, into the police station, which, you know, work is ongoing, and that is happening now, that new partnership, that joint working together. And certainly the inspector, the chief inspector, the team on the ground are working excellently with our public protection team and our ASB team. And I meet the chief inspector every 2 months. So, you know, I think we've got a fabulous working relationship with them, but they are very much stressed on resources. There is no doubt about it. Resources and skills. But what they've got, they do the best with, and it must be very upsetting for the team that's actually employed by Lincolnshire Police to have this category of needing significant improvement to them, because with the, like I said, with the individuals and the resources that they have, we work excellently with them, and I couldn't ask anything more of them.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Sarah, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I should have reiterated that they are really, really good. And as a district councillor, last week I had a parish council contact me that the Brownies, there was some trouble about stranger danger, etc. And within 2 days, PCSO had turned up and to talk to the Brownies. There is a lot of good stories, and I think we are lucky to live. I do think in Lincolnshire is generally a safe place to live, and what we've got we do the best with. So always support the police, definitely. And yes, it is a sad scenario, but you can only work with what you've got financially.
Likewise, Sarah, I'm always keen to support the police as well in any way we can, and that good working relationship and the communication is so important in that. Now I'm going to give the opportunity for any other members that want to come back on this item as well. Oh, Philip wants to come in as well, didn't he?
Only to say thank you, Sarah, for alerting people to it, and Karen for your comments. I mean, of course, it is very serious, you know, for any police force to be, and we're one of 43 across the country, to be put into special measures. And we know, for goodness dare I say, in this council, we know how long it takes you to get out of special measures when you put in them. And so I think it's not going to be a short job. It's going to be quite a long period. As I understand it, as Sarah said, the police and crime panel we'll meet on January, I think it's the 10th, isn't it? Yeah, for a special extraordinary meeting that I know Sarah and myself were lobbying the chairman for. Well, I don't think we needed to lobby. He knew that we had to do that. It's quite a wide-ranging criticism that the inspectorate's made, I've got to say. You know, as Sarah said, it partly, you know, concern about monitoring sex offenders is one of the issues. But what worried me particularly was suggesting that there's a lack of an adequate strategic plan, and the chief constable is required as part of this process, as I understand it, to go down to London within weeks and present an urgent improvement plan, and you know, they'll decide whether that's acceptable or not, and whatever the next stage is. But as I say, I think it'll take a while to get out of that process, whatever happens. Clearly, as Sarah said, funding for Lincolnshire Police has long been an issue, and we've always been at the bottom of the pile, you know, per population. I was on the police authority in 2004-05 time, and we were putting to the previous government looking for more money for Lincolnshire. But as colleagues have said, we are fortunate to live in Lincolnshire. It is generally a low crime area, so the chances of being a victim of crime here are certainly lower than many other places in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Funding is usually the crux of most things, isn't it? And we are such a large county here in Lincolnshire, bear that in mind. Okay, if there's no other items of that, before I close the meeting, we've got just over 2 weeks to Christmas. It'll be the last opportunity for me to say to our planning officers, thank you very much indeed for all the good work that you do. I know it's a difficult job that you do. I do know that. So a big thank you for your efforts on that. Please pass it on to all your team members. Wish you guys all a very Merry Christmas as well. Just want to say a thank you as well to Emma, Vice Chair in today's meeting. Thank you. And also I want to say a thank you to Josh, who's been doing a wonderful job in preparation to this meeting, folks, I can tell you. So, Joshua, thank you very much indeed. Your efforts are absolutely very much appreciated. So to you all, if don't see you, obviously got a meeting tomorrow, the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and so look forward to that. So the rest of you, wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Thank you.